cracking. So welcome to the final Treehouse panel of the day. Oh, I was expecting dramatic. Aww. Anyway, this panel is based around challenges in practice. So really getting to the heart of the Grad Con theme for this year. To discuss challenges in practice, we're going to have three wonderful speakers. Our first speaker today is going to be Kirsty O'Rourke, who is a public engagement assistant for the History of Parliament. Kirsty received her MA in Public History from the University of York last year, and her passion lies in policy and reconciliation. So we're going to get Kirsty up in just a second. I'm sure you're all aware of how the panels work at this stage, but we will be having three speakers and then a Q&A afterwards. Just to make you all aware, it's more for the attention of those of you watching at home, that one of the papers in this panel will not be filmed. That's Hannah's paper, who will come third. So the live stream will go off just for the duration of that paper, and then we'll come back to life for the Q&A afterwards. So yeah, we'll crack on. Kirsty, if you want to come forward.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. Okay, hello everybody. As you've heard, my name is Kirsty and I work in the public engagement team for the History of Parliament. Today I'm going to be talking about the history of Parliament as sort of a place where public history works in an academic institution. Before I start, my manager's watching, so I definitely want to say, my job's good, I enjoy my job. I'm going to be looking at it critically, but everybody's supportive, it's a nice place to work. So just a wee bit about my structure. I'm going to be defining a couple of things. I'll be telling you what the History of Parliament actually is, the role of the public engagement team within it, issues and limitations that we face, and how I feel that public engagement, public history is essential for the future-proofing of the History of Parliament. At the end, I'm going to do a wee summary conclusion where I talk about whether public history is valued in academic institutions and what the value of it is. What is public history? I'm not going to tell you, I don't think I could do that right now. But public history in my presentation is public engagement. So it's a singular branch of public history, but that's what I'm meaning when I talk about public history. Am I a public historian? Is it public history? I don't know. For a different, more existential presentation, I think. So what is the History of Parliament? I've got some notes so I don't get things wrong. The History of Parliament was founded before World War II. It was the brainchild of Josiah Wedgwood, former MP at the time. And it's a research project creating a comprehensive account of parliamentary politics in England, Britain, and then the UK from its origins in the 13th century up until present day. The research produces biographies of all known MPs and peers, and it also looks at constituencies and does articles for them as well. Altogether, we have published in print 65 volumes containing more than 27,000 MPs' biographies and 3,000 constituency articles from 1386 to 1832. Ooh, it's a lot. Our first one was published in 1964. We have some current research on the screen just to let you know that we are still doing things. We are now researching up to 1868, and we're also doing contemporary history. Used to be called our Oral History Project. We use oral history as a source, so a lot of it is interviewing former MPs and peers and just getting a life story of them. This stuff is all then uploaded onto our website. Please, no questions about the website at the end. It's in development, and it has been for years, I've been told, so we'll see how that goes. But you can see from the board that it is more of a reference organisation. So we research biographies, we tell you where the person sat, when they sat, what speeches they made in Parliament, who their family members were. It's maybe not the most accessible thing, but in theory, researchers, be it local historians, family historians, academic historians, the general public, come along and they infer, they take away things from it. We've had people uncover LGBTQ+ histories because of this work. Somebody was looking at illegitimate children of MPs and lords and what happened to them because of this work. However, it's not the most accessible. It is filled to the brim with abbreviations. It took me until my 6 months to realise that DA meant daughter of, and not as I kept saying in my head, your dad. So sometimes not even accessible to people that work there. Funding. We are funded by the House of Lords and the House of Commons. We are overseen by a board of trustees that includes MPs, peers, parliamentary staff. We also have an editorial board which is filled with academics. Our staffing ourselves, we have about 30 people that are on our payroll. What is the purpose of us? Good question. So as you saw from the previous slide, our purpose is to create records and record lives of MPs and constituencies. And then we produce that reference format for everybody to see. But recently we have developed our aims, and we now focus a wee bit more on advancing the education of the public in general on the subject of the history of Parliament. That was quoted in the annual review. So this is where public engagement fits in. The public engagement team, there's 2 of us, and we were created in 2011. I think this is one of the first times where there's been a team of 2. Normally it's just a team of 1. But what do we look after? Okay, so we do social media, we do website, we do graphic design, we do marketing, we do education, we do copyright and blogging, we do analytics for things, we do the sort of email inbox, we do audio-visual stuff, all of the things that, you know, just 2 people can do. I worry, and this is where the first limitation comes in, that we're spreading ourselves a wee bit too thin. You see these national organisations, they've got a lot more money than us and a lot more staff, but they would have an education team. They would have a marketing team. We don't. We don't have the ability to do that right now. And so, whilst we're flittering all over the place, and as my manager will attest, I do flitter all over the place, I worry that maybe the quality of our output, or we're not having enough quantity in a certain field, it's really being limited. Now I say there's a team of 2 of us. Everybody in the organisation has public engagement written into their contracts, as a lot of academic historians now do. That sort of means doing a wee bit of blogging, looking over our tweets for us, and all of these things. And there is a university outreach as well, but we are the main public engagement people. But we've seen from our Braddock report of 2018 that public engagement is wanted by the organisation and it's needed by the organisation. But there's some issues and limitations we face as an organisation. Now this last question here, this is my favourite question to ask on a Monday morning to my manager. She hates it, sets herself up really badly for the rest of the week. What's the point of us? What are we doing here? Why are we here? And it's never really answered. There's all these different things that maybe this is the point of us. It's just general interest. We hope people get involved with it. But what are we doing? Who's our audience? And that is a massive question. So we've split our audience into parliamentary staff, political staff and MPs. That's one. Second one, academic historians and networks, which includes students at undergrad and postgrad. Third one, teachers, Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 5, we don't tend to do primary stuff. Fourth one, general interest or underserved groups. And then the 5th one, local family historians. So that's a lot of audiences to be working towards as a team of 2. And what makes it harder is we've got things like general interest. That's what we want to be hitting. And our general interest is 18 to 35-year-olds. Yeah, 18-year-olds have the exact same wants, needs, everything that a 35-year-old does. We'll hit that easy. No worries, lads. We can take that. So, what are we supposed to do with this? I think it makes it even worse because, not worse, I take that back. I love my job. What makes it more difficult is we're in an academic institution. My manager and I are the youngest people in the institution. We're in the public engagement team. We sit in the basement of the offices. Take that as what you will. But the general atmosphere of the history of Parliament is old school academics. And when you think of that ivory tower that we all kind of think, it doesn't really exist anymore, does it? No, it's gone. We've taken it down. No, it still exists. Lots of people are constantly questioning us, making us justify ourselves. I think we should always justify what we're doing. But why are you on TikTok? Like, why, as an academic researcher, researching a specific MP, why are you taking my work and putting it on TikTok? And you are only doing it in a minute? Yeah, but so how can you make sure that you're being correct the whole time? How can you make sure that someone's not inferring it incorrectly? And then you discuss, like, oh, no, well, we make sure that everything that we're putting out there is correct, but we're opening a discussion, and isn't that great? And if people come back to us with some myth they've heard, or something they think they know about, then we can have that discussion. No, but what they're saying is wrong. Okay, good point, well made. So there's definitely difficulties that we face. I think our aim in the strategy that we created was to embed public engagement into the work of research staff and the organisation. Because too often, some of my colleagues, others of my colleagues are amazing and want to outreach with the public, but some of my colleagues don't see why they need to. Like, they're the authority. Why does the public need to know about this? They just want to talk to academics. The public might not understand. It's also difficult because it's the history of Parliament. The public have ownership of Parliament. They should do. Sorry, that might not be neutral enough for my job. But they also own the history, so we should be able to collaborate with them. We should be able to do all of these things. But we're prevented from it all the time. We're overseen by Lords and MPs. We're overseen with money even. That's a limitation, that's a difficulty that we have. So how do we move past this? How do we make sure that public engagement is embedded in the history of Parliament? Well, I think it's all about our future-proofing. We are currently changing our director at the moment. A new director will come in December. And a lot of the questions at the time was, okay, well, where is the history of Parliament going? You've got so much research. Once all of this research is done, are you just going to go back and do research again and hope that maybe something new's come up? Like, what are you doing? And it was always about, well, we need to get digital. We need to make sure we're becoming the authority for this parliamentary history to everybody, every single audience. How do you do that? I don't know. If anyone's got any tips, let me know. But I think one of the ways that we've been looking at it is our contemporary history project, which used to be called the Oral History Project. And that was created in about 2011. So was the Public History team. So, as I keep alluding to, we're a very new team in a very old organisation. But the Oral History Project uses or works with volunteer interviewers, so you don't have to be a historian, you don't have to have interest in history, you can have interest in politics, or you can just have interest in people's lives. And we all go out and we interview these people. And the people doing the interviewing have impact on the interviews that happen, because whatever their interests are, they're going to go more for that. So each source that we're creating with our volunteers is changed by that volunteer. And I think that's a lovely part of public history, is that collaboration and that creation of something that you wouldn't have got necessarily. It's like a lot of the people I work with are fully trained in oral history, and they listen to one that a volunteer's done, and it's different. They've picked out things that maybe that academic historian wouldn't have done. Also, we are a lot better with the Oral History Project for doing events and lectures and making sure it gets out there. We are hopefully going to be producing a podcast series which will be coming out 2024 maybe. Watch this space. But so I think for the history of Parliament to go on, we need this embedding. It needs to be meshed into the very fabric of the history of Parliament. It's all well and good going, we're the history of Parliament, we've got this research team, and this research team. Oh, and tacked on in the basement, we've got the public engagement team. it needs to be there from the start. Every single aim the History of Parliament has needs to have public engagement in it, needs to have public history in it. We are constantly involved with everything. It's not one of those things where, God, Kirsty's emailing me about a blog again and I just don't care. It needs to be there from the start. A lot of my colleagues do that, don't get me wrong. But it's that thing of, is public history valued? To some people, yeah, they can really see the value of it. A lot of my colleagues come to us with ideas of what to do, how to get out of there. For a lot of other people, they want nothing to do with it. And it's about showing them the value that public history can have. Because after they finish their research, what's going to happen to their research? It's just going to stay on a bookshelf, that nobody can afford the books anyway, but it's just going to stay on a bookshelf in a library and hope that somebody's going to be able to access this terminology and these abbreviations. It's really, really difficult. I realise I am coming quite quickly to the end of this. Please come up to me afterwards this evening with loads of questions, because I've got so much more to say. But before I disappear, some shameless self-promotion. We are the History of Parliament, and we're fantastic. We are on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We're on Blue Sky, we're on Threads, we're on TikTok. We're on YouTube with a slightly less catchy username than the others. Or I'm here. I also have business cards. Please ask me for a business card at the end. I designed it. It's beautiful. So please do get in contact with us if you ever want to know about any MP, if you ever want to know about a constituency, or if you have an idea. If you have an idea about a research project that you want to do, or that you want to collaborate with us on, please come to us. We are always looking for new ways to get out there and to diversify. So yes, while there's criticisms, I think we're super, and I think you should follow us. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Kirsty. So I'm going to welcome our next speaker up to the front. Katie, if you want to come and join us. Katie has completed her MA in Public History this year here at York, and she is a computer science trained historian interested in how digital innovation is changing the heritage sector. So I'm going to hand over to Katie now. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, like she said, I have only been studying public history the past year as my MA. I studied computer science for 8 years in both high school and university, and that is what my bachelor's degree is in. So a lot of what I'm discussing is about the role of underfunding and understaffing in the heritage sector, but I do focus a lot specifically with digital usage and how that can be utilized to help this. I just finished my dissertation on Tuesday, as many of us did, and it is actually on the usage of websites and social media in the heritage sector, and I will be quoting some from it, hence why my dissertation is sitting in front of me. But let's start with just some basics. We've talked about it all day, so, you know, still gonna talk about it again. Sorry, y'all. What is underfunding and understaffing? Well, underfunding is the lack or insufficiency of financial resources. This could be used to allocate for operations, maintenance, staff salaries, exhibitions, and other things that are essential to a heritage institution. I'm using that term because I am covering everything from museums to universities to the small little thing that you go visit in your hometown that has a little memorial, because all of these can be affected by that. If they are underfunded, there could be deferred maintenance, substandard exhibits, dwindling visitors numbers, and overall financial instability that just makes the problem worse. As well, this problem hampers the ability of institutions to fulfill their missions, which typically are something to do with educational or cultural values in the area. This results in challenges such as limited curatorial research, delayed exhibit development, and reduced resources for staff training, which I touch upon quite a bit. Understaffing, on the other hand, is an inadequate number of personnel or staff members to carry out operations and fulfill responsibilities. Just going to slightly point to Kirsty right now. Hi, we just talked about that just a little bit. Significant challenges, this is huge, and faced by a lot of museums and historical societies, especially when they're smaller. They tend to give a lot of people for individual things. So I did in my dissertation interviews with a lot of people, and I actually have a quote from one that she said, a lot of people are now supposed to do social media and they don't know what they're doing, and it's really hard. And that these people typically are the youngest in the organization. And they are forced into it because they're the youngest in the organization, and they are the only ones who probably even know what Twitter X, which I hate saying, is. This can lead to a lot of various challenges that also kind of tie into underfunding, which means that they can have a bad quality or scope in their museums. They end up too specifically focused. There wasn't enough diversity in the conversation, as well as it can impact their ability to serve the public, which is really what we do. That's the point of public history. We're trying to serve the public. So why is this important? I kind of talked upon that. Underfunding and understaffing is crucial in combating to make sure that institutions are properly serving their missions, which typically is to educate the public, but also to facilitate these conversations and start sharing authority with the new museology ideas introduced in the 90s. This institution, these can host anything from artwork to, again, just a local park. However, the challenges of underfunding and understaffing severely impact their abilities to function. So a lot of this focuses on Wessex Museum. This was actually what my MA placement was here through York. It is a partnership consisting of 7 museums located around the Wessex region. This is Dorset, Swindon has 3, Steam Museum, the Swindon Museum and Art Gallery, the Lydiard House Museum, Salisbury, and then you have Poole and Wiltshire. So all of those museums are now kind of partnered with Wessex Museum. So my main objective with this partnership was to help them learn how to promote and enhance the cultural exhibit of the region, as well as these museums all work together to preserve and present the historical and cultural artifacts of the Wessex region. So my placement lasts 3 months, and in the midst of which, I had to go back to the US in a family emergency. So luckily, I could work digital, which is great. So this institution, Wessex itself, is digital, even though the museums have physical locations. So my job was to enhance the Wessex Museum's website. The only reason I was able to do this is because I've been a computer scientist for 8 years and worked in IT for 4. So I actually went with them and did a comprehensive analysis of their existing website and was able to determine where there were areas that weren't actually meeting their goal, which they specified to me, as Wessex Museum itself is the partnership institution that is trying to reach people in the sector itself and not the general public, which is quite interesting now studying public history of how do we take this institution and merge it to a more sector focus while also reaching the individuals in the public for the museums that we are serving. So that was quite an interesting challenge. I also had to help them with the transition from Universal Linux to Google Analytics 4, which is a lot of tech talk that I had to explain how to do to them. And lastly, Swindon Museums, all 3 of them just joined recently to Wessex. They still are building their partnerships, and I had to integrate them into the website as well. So this is important for a few reasons. I've noticed a lot when I was doing this placement, coming from a computer science background, that while this organization has huge goals, and I met most of the partnership museums as well, they are very understaffed and underfunded. But they will never tell you that. Like, that is not something we discuss. We keep it to ourselves, or it's kept quietly. But like me coming from a computer science background, it was fascinating to me. Like, most people make 6 figures really easily, and understaffing really isn't an issue. So it was like the jobs that I've done are with a team of people are being done by 1 or 2 individuals, running the social medias, running all this. And we're seeing the capacity, especially post-COVID, for digital to be used and to outreach, but how can that be done to combat understaffing and underfunding? Because you have to know what you're doing to work tech. So this is the big issue I saw was digital outreach and the internal capacity. So a lot of institutions, including Wessex, has to outsource for them to be able to do anything digital. So this means their website was outsourced to a company they have to pay for every year. Me, I was free because the university sent me. However, typically if I was doing this job, it would have been a 6-figure salary in the past for me. So these aren't easy skills to come by, and people charge quite a lot for them. So if we start building up an internal capacity, which I talk about sort of at the bottom, this would reduce the capacity for outsourcing because they'd have someone in the sector. But how do we pay for that? Well, here's the issue. We're understaffed, but we're also underfunded, which is why I discussed both of them together. So this idea of training the staff to be able to do a job builds up on the idea of, well, what is our brand? Do we want to have a digital outreach? I obviously am saying we do, but we want to do so correctly. So digital platforms provide the opportunity for institutions to share their collections, their knowledge, and their stories with a wider audience, promote more cultural engagement, which a lot of institutions are now trying to focus on, is how do we reach the community? Well, the best way to reach them is where they already are, which for most people, it's Facebook. LinkedIn is one that Wessex now gets on that I actually never considered, but it's brilliant for a museum. As well as TikTok, which UK institutions are starting to not be able to get on, which is another whole topic, I talk about that in my dissertation, is the finickiness of it. This also fosters engagement. So when we have this digital platform, instead of you having to focus on, let's say, sending 3 staff members out to go on the street to have a communication, which is still important, I'm not just saying replace it, but you could have an online Twitter conversation where you're getting this engagement and you're sharing this exhibit with people online to have this interaction. So staff training and development could be done in tech by offering raises, which I know is a fun word that they never do, training programs and incentives. So one way that I saw that could be done is anything that is Art Council funded, which is a lot of institutions that I'm learning slowly here. I'm not British, so I am slowly learning. Actually can use something called the Digital Tech Champions. So it's over 20 people that are trained in digital technology. So the one I met did cybersecurity for 30 years. And they actually go free to these heritage institutions and teach them how to do things like film TikToks and post on social media and change your analytics and all of this stuff, and it's completely free to use. So they are starting to see some resources that can be built up that people need to know and utilize. There's also the Digital Learning Network that I am part of the committee for that are starting to kind of compile these resources. So even finding these free resources and these free communities to join can actually help kind of combat both underfunding and understaffing in a digital perspective. Another way to mitigate funding challenge is with stakeholder involvement and increased funding. Stakeholders can be anything from local communities, businesses, philanthropists, and cultural organizations should really consider these. A lot of the times, like Kitty's paper, we talk a lot about the National Lottery for Heritage Fund. They do give a lot of money, but a lot of the times you can find people in your local community that are willing to support things, even if it's just small. Westage Museum specifically did a podcast for last year for their Hardy's Wessex exhibit, which they did during COVID.
Please don't criticize it.
She did, that was her placement, which is why I'm smiling at her. She did the podcast. And to raise money for this whole exhibit, they actually did a crowdfunder. They raised, I think, 3 times what they expected to earn. For a crowdfunder, they did have to commodify a little bit, which again is a topic I talk in my dissertation a bit. But you can find people, and people are willing to. Some of the partnership museums have also done crowdfunders since then, and they have been highly successful. So you can do these outreaches if you can do them correctly and know how to, which goes back to the Digital Tech Champions do train for that as well. So increased funding as well enables institutions to maintain their collections better. And I kind of say I really think that governments need to start prioritizing public history more and support these institutions. And honestly, a lot of that is going to be us. We're going to have to start promoting a lot more about why we matter and what is public history. And we do that all the time, and I hate to say that's still the best way to do it, is why is this important? Why do we care what a museum does for the community? And it's building those relationships that are going to cause them to notice us. The best example I can think right now is Wrexham. Like, I like football. So Wrexham has gotten a lot of money from Ryan Reynolds, I will say, but they've also gotten granted some government funding because now the king has visited, because now the community is getting around, they're being able to make those connections, and that is what people in Hollywood do best. So these are kind of my big overfunding of how digital can help underfunding and understaffing, but also hinder it, and that's the big issue. I don't have all the answers. I did this paper in October. So I have since expanded on it quite a lot, 81 pages, but it's this idea of using the resources we have more wisely, because a lot of people kind of stay focused. They, especially like Kirsty said, they don't want to share, or they don't know where to share, or they don't know where to question until there's a 20-year-old who's like, we've joined TikTok, and they're on TikTok, and this kind of whole collaboration starts. Things tie in a lot more than people realize is another thing I've realized. I never thought that me as a computer scientist worked in a public history institution, but here I am. I mean, social media is becoming more of a widely spread thing, as well as websites, especially post-COVID, because we've noticed that happened. However, anything as small as just learning how to reach people, how to stay up to date, those are all really important skills that need to be valued more and aren't discussed enough, a lot that I've noticed in the institution as a critical aspect. So overall, heritage institutions are crucial, and we need to discuss that more and talk about why this museum in this small town actually means to the community, but also to the heritage overall, which someone's presentation earlier talked about, that financial pressures are bad and they lead to deferred maintenance and substandard exhibits and declining visitor numbers. So wherever we can save money and not cause issues is the big thing to do. And that understaffing which hinders underfunding, can lead to lack of management, curation of exhibits, and organizing programs. That stakeholders need to start adopting more sustainable strategies to ensure long-term viability, which again is one reason that I'm offering digital, because they work as great storage spaces and they tend to be cheaper than a physical location. So a lot of digitizing, I hate using that word because I don't mean it just for archives, but digitizing resources, using it as a news compile, they can be done correctly and efficiently with the correct training, which is offered through free resources like the Digital Learning Network, as well as people like me, who I will happily volunteer, I still do, even though I'd love to be paid. I'm a sucker for it, it's okay though. Then building the internal capacity for digitalization through staff training and development can help overcome these challenges because the people are trained to do the jobs that they are doing. So one, they feel more validated because the company is actually recognizing the fact that they've spent hours learning how TikTok works and the algorithm systems, but at the same time, they're being noticed for the job that they're doing. And last but not least, that collaborative efforts and sustainable strategies, this can actually help the preservation of cultural heritage, and this can be ensured for future generations, which at the end of the day is our main goal, is staying relevant and keeping ourselves moving. Yeah, that's it.
The Q&A section of this panel will be recorded. Hannah will not be joining us for the Q&A. However, if you do have questions, Hannah is more than happy to chat with you in the break that's coming up just after this panel. So if I could ask Katie and Kirsty to join us back at the front, we will be ready to open the floor for questions. Does anyone have anything to add or any reflections? Yeah, Kitty.
Thank you. So I think this question is for both of you. And so when you were talking about how understaffing is an issue and that you are doing, or one person is doing so many different things that requires knowledge and skills, which other people who have those skills, developed over an MA or a BA or long period of time. Would you say that it's our job, ethical job, to say no? I cannot make a historical resource, an educational resource because I don't know how to do it. I will mess it up. Or do you think that we should just get on with it?
I'm hoping that Katie says it's not unethical because that's what I do every day. I think it's really hard. I think it's good to say no. I think it's good to put your boundary out there and be there like, I don't know how to do that. What do you want from me? But I unfortunately think from, as you may have heard in Katie's great presentation, understaffing and underfunding is such an issue that if I say no, it's just not going to get done. Yep. No, well, I've got background in education, but let me pick marketing. No, I can't do the marketing. Okay, nobody's ever going to know about a single event we do now, and that's on you, Kirsty. Why didn't you do that? They wouldn't say that. That'd be really horrible. But I do think you should go, I don't know how to do that, give me the training. And so that's what I did. Luckily, I have an amazing friend that teaches graphic design, and I was able to go, I'm going to train with her for a couple of days. And then, yes, I'll be able to create your resources. Let's communicate with other people. Let's do all of these things. I don't think it's unethical to say, yeah, I'll add more to my plate. Maybe it's just, I don't have much self-preservation a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'll add to that. In this field, what I've noticed in a year is people need to learn how to say no, but it's the way you say no.
Yes.
So, like, what she's saying is, I don't think there's anything wrong with being honest. When I did my placement with Wessex, they had me do an in-person chat for something, which for me, as a tech nerd, I worked IT, I could tell you all day how to fix your printer, but this was new to me. And so I was like, okay, you want me to, like, show how this funding application did X, Y, Z. Can you tell me how to do that? And a lot of the times I've noticed, because people in the industry have been in that position themselves, they tend to be willing to. And I'm just gonna be honest, I don't like working for places that won't. Drives my mother nuts, but I'm like, no, I'm not gonna work there. They don't treat me right. But that is just me. So no, I wouldn't say it's unethical. As like coming from a computer science background, like I said, I have nothing against somebody who's picked it up on the side, doing it themselves, and like I honestly wish they'd reach out. Because a lot of us would be willing to, I'll show you how to update the website, I don't mind. I'm working on a committee right now for the digital learning network. And that's a lot of what we do, is we all volunteer, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna have a conversation about AI in 2 months. That's gonna be a big one, we're prepping for 2 months for it. But like, having those conversations are important because otherwise it's not gonna be fixed. So it's not only saying no, it's starting the conversation of, okay, well, we need this done, I don't know how to do it, this is seeming an issue, we need to address this. If that answers your questions from yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yeah, we'll go to it first.
Fantastic, thank you both so much. It was really interesting, and I mean, you both kind of covered this in your presentations anyway, but I just wondered if you could say a bit more about it, because do you find that within the organisations that you work with or have worked with, that there is an assumption that if you put something online, if you put it out there, people will come? And I wonder if you have any kinds of specific instances in which that's a challenge, you know, just whack it online and that's done and dusted, and how have you kind of addressed this?
Yeah, so again, I did my whole dissertation on the usage of websites and social media in the sector. So I did a lot of interviews and looked at a lot of analytical data, and from what I've noticed, that's not the expectation from the people who are directly. So I have to stay anonymous, but because I agreed to them I would, but I interviewed everything from a CEO to the tech person. And it seems like there's an understanding, if at least one of them said, and I love this quote, if at least someone at the top has a digital understanding, the rest of the organization has a respect, is what it seems to be. So from the ones I've worked for, there has at least been someone who's like, we know it doesn't always work out. We know if you're gonna post something, it doesn't always draw the attention, and the digital media people, whatever they call it, there's so many different names, talk a lot about how this in of itself is a full-time job, and they can't treat it as such. That if you're gonna post something online, you have to be aware that people are gonna comment, and you need to have this discussion. So I think people are, out of necessity, making the realizations that this isn't how this works. You can't just, well, I literally have a quote of, you can't just paste it online and leave it. You have to actually interact with people, because that was the goal in the first place. So having this kind of conversation seems to be becoming more understood, especially post-COVID. That was a lot of what my focus was on, because we've had discussions about websites before, is after COVID, what changed? And a lot of people are coming to the realization of, oh, people will interact, and now in this post-COVID era, the people coming back to reality is, I guess, the best way to put, even though we can debate for post-COVID, that's a whole other argument. Having this understanding of how to engage with people and what is the appropriate engagement now that people are coming to the museums again. So that seems to be my understanding.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. When you say if they build it, they will come, I was there like, yeah, everybody thinks that. But no, probably most of my organisation understand that they don't. And in the opposite direction, some people in my organisation don't know why we're trying to build. So we recently went on TikTok. I know, it's too traumatic to talk about it. But we had to justify ourselves so much, why we should be on it, why people would care. And I think a lot of the organisation does understand that actually just putting ourselves out there isn't enough a lot of the time. There's a few times, I think I'm guilty for it, going, I did a great tweet and nobody cared, not a single person, why not? Why didn't anyone access this tweet? So I think we're optimistic in the idea of maybe if we build it, they will come, but we are very understanding that that's not what happens. I think it's the experience to know that that's not what happens. But then I don't think we take that next step and we go, well, why didn't that happen? We do the analytics in my team, but again, it only takes you so far when you're a team of 2. So yeah, I think I agree. Optimistically, I think if we build it, they will come. But from experience, yeah, we found out that they don't. But now the next step for these institutions is to go, why didn't that happen? Why did it happen for that one? Not just because it was topical, not just because we were on a trending hashtag. What else did we do that was different there? But yeah. This has given a lot of feedback.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Yeah.
I'm deciding I'm going to be that guy today. How do you avoid political bias?
Oh,
Rather
I feel like this one might be aimed a wee bit. Go on, hit that.
like, unironically, I'm very interested. If there is a process, then how does it look like? How do you vet it? How do you communicate so it doesn't come off as biased?
Yeah, so part of my job, part of my role is neutrality, which I don't think exists. I think being neutral is picking a side. So I really struggle with it in my workplace. A lot of it is balance. As in, if we're going to talk about the Conservatives, we're going to talk about the Labour Party. So it's very, very beginner level balance a lot of the time. It's also just trying to put facts out there, just trying to say what happened when it happened, and leaving the interpretation up to everybody else. So we open that discussion about a specific thing. But it's so difficult, especially when I got into public history, because I think public history can be used for activism. I think it can be used to help reconciliation processes. I think it needs to be used to be talked about all of these things that we are whitewashing every day. And then you get into an institution that, unfortunately, a lot of the time, MPs are white men in history. I don't know if you guys know this. Blow your mind. But it's sometimes the most privileged people. We're up to 1868 with our research. Maybe it's not about how we can make sure that we're not being biased, but how we can make sure that we are diversifying what we can put out there with such a limited specimen of people. But yes, in my interview for public history, I got asked about my Irish writing, because I write a lot about Ireland, and the director went, "How would you write about Ireland in this organisation?" And I was like, "Oh, I hope you wouldn't? No." But yeah, it's really hard to do, and there are processes. It gets checked by lots of numerous people. You need to make sure that you are talking about everybody and everything, and all of that stuff. You look like you've got a follow-up.
Yeah. Sorry, being a nuisance. No, just you said you're up to 86. That means you're touching on people who are still in power.
Oh, 1886.
18, okay.
And I actually, that was wrong. It's 1868, sorry. Oh, date's wrong. We are doing contemporary history, though. We are doing oral history interviews and things, and that does include people that are still in the Lords, and that is more difficult. We're talking about maybe doing a Brexit conference at some point, and even now we're still there like, oh, how would we do that? Well, I'll tell you how we do it. None of us sit up at the front. We'll get a think tank people to host it, and then we'll get some other people to talk on it. We'll vaguely be involved, but it's not our name. No, we didn't say that stuff.
We all just point at Liz Truss and run away.
Liz Truss exists. That's neutrality, right?
So we did start the panel a little bit late, so we've got time for one more question. Let's take that.
Yeah, so someone in a previous life who was a museum professional, another important part of my job was social media. And I think quite a lot of what you both touched on today really highlights that sort of the kind of difficulties of an institution where it's very much seen as like young people must do the social media because they understand it, they do it. They like, I know you have quite a large following, Laura, you can do social media. But it wasn't really important for us, particularly during COVID. But it was one of those where, because I already had those kind of skills and understanding, it was kind of like you were the perfect fit for this. There wasn't really a desire to train anybody up to do that. So it was very much like once I left, that then died a death. I don't know if any of you have an answer or any thoughts about it, but kind of how do you, sort of I found it very difficult to get people to actually understand the importance of social media within a heritage space and actually why, like you say, just putting it out there and people will see it is not how that works. And as much as I think that is what, generally speaking, higher ups seem to think, that doesn't really work in practice. So do you have any ideas about how, like, getting kind of wider organisations and, you know, sort of from the top down, getting people actually to engage with social media in a meaningful way, and sort of whether you think that's through more funding or whether you think that's through training, or, you know, there is no perfect answer at all, because, you know, I struggle myself, but just from your own experiences, if you could comment at all about what you think it might be.
Yeah, okay. Honestly, there's no answer. So I did my partnership with Wessex, but you did too, but you didn't have Swindon yet. So they actually, I won't say which museum, they actually had a social media curator, and she quit. So they have no one, and they've given it to 6 individuals. So one person's job has now been spread to 6. That should tell you something already, and none of them know what they're doing. So it is definitely a pervasive problem. I think one of the biggest ways we can start showing is, like I talked about, being more vocal. I mean, it could be a generational thing, and my lack of fear, because I'm from Southern America, that I will tell somebody this isn't working, and we need to fix it, and if we don't fix it, we're gonna have a problem. So, I mean, I had a very clear discussion with Christina, the CEO of Wessex. She wanted to start a blog, and I told her no. Because I was very clear, and she respected my opinion, that we do not have the resources, you are already overloaded, you want your website fixed, you cannot do the blog. Very respectful of it. I said it a little more respectfully, of course. My mama would have a cow if I talked to anyone that way. But I think knowing how those conversations and having research to back you up tends to be good. So, like, I did a lot of analytical data for Wessex, and it showed them very clearly, this is what's working, and if we want to have this keep working and have this communication, this is what we need to invest in. So I know it's more work on the individual, but sometimes we have to break the glass ceiling ourselves for other people behind us, and that's kind of a lot of the time what I think my goal is, to make it easier for the people who come behind me. And they don't need to fight as much to have social media training, because it's just part of the institution now. We know where to go to get it, and somebody's passing it on. Me personally, I love making how-to guides. So if you know I have a computer science degree, I've written a whole user manual for voice over IP phones. So a lot of the times too, writing down what you're doing, at least if it doesn't help an institution-wide, it will help who comes behind you. So it puts them in a better position of, okay, this is a password for this, of course, but also, like, this is a shortcut that I've learned that'll save you this much time, and this kind of things can always help people behind you maybe have more time to have those conversations, because they're not spending 30 minutes trying to figure out how you formatted the setting, because I've done that plenty of times. So yeah, that's kind of, it's a non-answer, because there isn't one, but it's the best I can give you.
Now time for my perfect answer. No, I agree with what's being said already. I think we're too quick sometimes to be there, like, oh, it's always going to be on the young person to do something. We've got 2 other social media pages alongside HISPAR. One of them is Georgian Lords, one of them is Victorian Commons. These are colleagues that aren't watching, so I can say probably at least 20 years older than me, maybe. And the Georgian Lords, the editor for it, I love him to pieces. I think he's amazing. He is always on Twitter, he is posting, he is engaging. He is doing more than I am doing on the Twitter feed. Like, he is going out of his way because he sees the value of it. Not necessarily in the way that maybe public historians do, but he's got a network, he's got a community, and it might be just other academics, or it might be every now and again somebody that really riles him up the wrong way. But he has that community, and he loves doing it, and he loves putting an image out of some random satirical comic, mainly of John Wilkes at the moment, because that's his project. So I think we're too quick to be there, like, the senior staff in an organisation are going to leave it to the younger ones, because I found that a lot of my colleagues are really interested. They're like, so what's Elon doing these days? And I'm like, if you could tell me, that would be fantastic. I do think, though, that we do need to write our stuff down. So most of the time I think I've done it twice, hold a social media meeting, and I'll just talk about the current state of things at the moment and how everybody's getting on with it and what my experiences are. We've got an accessibility document that I wrote out about how to use old text, how to make transcriptions and things. And I think maybe I'm very, very lucky, but the organisation I'm in, they look at these things and they want to read it, they want to learn. So, I don't know, I think I'm pretty positive about it. I think it can be sorted. My last thing to say before we disappear is because I just saw that my manager messaged me, always checking up on me, and this is why she's a manager and not the assistant. But she brought up a very good point of when you say Liz Truss, I say George Canning, and for those of you that don't know him, please use our website, you'll be able to find him. He's the second shortest serving Prime Minister now, but a very, very interesting man. So please engage with our things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our brilliant speakers, Kirsty, Katie, and of course Hannah. So that concludes the Challenges in Practice panel. I believe we're now heading into a break. It's a bit of a longer break than we've had previously, so please do make the most of it. We've got some refreshments downstairs and also, of course, our brilliant poster presentations that you are welcome to read. After that, we will be heading downstairs into the Boland Auditorium for the practitioner panel, so please do join us then at 12:30. Thank you very much, everyone.